in the room, actually. I was in the locker room at that moment, but I heard the tape of the interview, and, Joe said, I sucked. I wasn't good enough. We weren't good enough. And so after I got done talking to Joe that day, I got in the car, and I'm listening to the post-game shows, and somebody calls in to Keith Mills' show and says, when is Joe Flacco going to be a man and stand up and take responsibility for what's going on with this team? Well, first of all, they were 2-2. It wasn't like they were winless. But beyond that, what more can you say besides I sucked? But that's, I asked Joe about it the next week, and he said, hey, that's part of the job. I know when we win, like they did in Oakland, people are going to be happy, and people are going to say I'm doing my job and I'm earning my check. And when we lose, they're going to say I'm not. That comes with the territory. So the book is sort of about the life of a handful of quarterbacks.
Well, and who are the other quarterbacks you're chronicling besides Joe, who, by the way, and I say this often, he's my all-time favorite Baltimore athlete, maybe my all-time favorite athlete that I've gotten to know a little bit from the inside, and I've been doing this a long time. I think he's a pretty special person, I think.
No, I really like Joe. I mean, I think he's genuine, and that I enjoy that. He's very smart, obviously, but he's also genuine. And when I was trying to put my group together, I mean, I knew Tom Brady wasn't going to do it, and I did sit down and talk to Rodgers. I thought he might do it, but I think because of what was, the story last year in the New York Times about his relationship with his parents and his brother, I think that made him a little gun shy. He brought it up to me, not the other way around. But I ended up with Joe, with Andrew Luck, who unfortunately has been hurt, but is another real smart guy, good guy. Alex Smith, who's having a hell of a year, another smart guy, good guy. There's a pattern here. Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's not a star by any means, but if I told you he'd thrown for 25,000 yards in his career, I think you'd probably be surprised.
I would say I wasn't watching a lot of Bills games during that era.
This is his seventh team, by the way.
Of course.
And then Doug Williams, different perspective. I wanted a quarterback from a different era, and I also wanted an African-American voice in the book because I think being an African-American quarterback is a different experience than being a white quarterback, and certainly Doug experienced a lot of that. And I've known him dating to his rookie year in Tampa. So he was sort of a natural guy for me to talk to.
And in a different place in management and the places he's been in coaching. What's interesting is you mentioned Luck. He's kind of different than the rest of these cats because, his old man did it, right? I mean, it was sort of like Manning where, and his old man didn't do it well. I was a Houston Oilers fan, so, I do remember that era where he was kind of trying to do it at that point on the back end of Love You Blue. But, there's a whole different thing when you're a bloodline, when you've, as Brian Billick would always say, John Harbaugh and Jim Harbaugh grew up around a kitchen table talking football with their dad. Right. Not everybody had that experience.
Yeah, and, Oliver was not a star, certainly, but he did play in the league for 8 years. So he experienced the NFL. He was a starter at different times, and Andrew will tell you that the first person he really looks to when he's going through something like this with the injury is still his dad, who by coincidence is living in Indianapolis now because he's working for the godforsaken NCAA.
That's a whole. You really want to segue into that, John?
No, I really don't. I shouldn't have said that.
You brought that up, man. I
know,
saw you
at
a basketball event.
Absolutely guilty.
Well, go ahead. Give me a minute on it. Give me a minute on the government getting involved in basketball, which has always had sort of these shady undertones and overtones. And, I don't think anybody's been around college basketball the last 40 years without needing some sort of a towel or a bath or some sort of deodorant to some degree because it's always kind of been baked into it, hadn't it?
Yeah, no, there's no question. And the funny thing is, I wrote a book 4 years ago, a kid's mystery. It was fiction called Foul Trouble. And basically the premise of the book was exactly what's been unfolding here these last few weeks. Star player being pushed by sneaker company reps, agents, money managers, AAU coaches to go to a couple of colleges that were both willing to pay for his services. And people have said to me, wow, you were really prescient with that. I wasn't prescient at all. I wrote that book based on stories I had encountered through the years, but I couldn't write in a nonfiction way because I couldn't get anybody to go on the record. So the only difference between this and what's been going on the last 35 years, since the sneaker companies got involved and since the summer leagues became so important in terms of recruiting, is that the FBI was involved. Because the FBI, unlike the NCAA, one, knows what it's doing, and two, they can subpoena, they can wiretap, they can tap phones and stuff. And so they were able to catch some people red-handed that the NCAA never would have caught. That's the only difference.
John, going into college basketball season, where do these stories go? And obviously, Pitino's going to be at the top of the pyramid here, but there's, this is the beginning, right? I mean, there's so many layers to the onion that we're still going to be, that are going to be reported, that are going to work their way into courts and into, as Andrew Brandt says, there will be lawyers, right? There'll be all of that going on. At what point do the people that watch basketball or, by Maryland, at what point do they care about this? Because I think if you cared about it,
they
all
only
that much,
care if it affects their team.
Sure,
Nestor. That's does a Maryland fan care about any of this? No, not at all, because Maryland's not involved. If Maryland were involved, most of them would be saying, "Oh, no, everybody." The answer, of course, is the Donald Trump answer: everybody does it, and that's not true. Everybody doesn't do it, but quite a number of people have been doing it. And I think we will see more schools, be involved in this. I think we'll see more head coaches. I don't think the FBI went into this with the notion that we're going to go nail 4 assistant coaches. I think they want more than that. And I think they're going to try to turn guys. I think they're going to keep going after other schools and other coaches and investigate all the shoe companies, not just Adidas. So I don't think this is over. But, again, most fans aren't going to care unless it affects their school. Louisville fans care. Miami fans care. Arizona fans care. Auburn fans care. But that's about it. The rest of it, the only other fans who care are like Kentucky fans, because they're just delighted that Louisville is going down in flames this way. But
I've been waiting for Duke to get busted for 30 years now, and it's just not happening. I've been waiting for Duke to get busted for 30 years.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't hold your breath.
Yeah, I know.
But if it were to happen, you'd be thrilled.
Of course I would be thrilled.
Yeah.
Like when bad things happen to the Steelers, and I'm waiting for that to happen as well. John Feinstein joining us here. He is Jay Feinstein Books. He's got a new book coming out next week. You're a golf fan, The First Major, and if you're a football fan, we're waiting on his new book, aptly titled Quarterback, and it's going to come out at Christmas time next year, and I've seen him running around, pen in hand, chasing around Joe Flacco here, who's a part of this book, along with 4 other quarterbacks. Boy, this has been a bad time to be chasing Joe Flacco around, John. I don't know that I've talked to Joe in about 3 weeks. I've just kind of, I don't want to say pity one way or another, but just working the other end of the room. I don't know what there is to say at this point. The story of this season, when it's all over with, will be injuries at some point, one way or another, because this has been kind of an unprecedented run. It felt good last week in Oakland. Doesn't feel so good this week going to Minnesota, though.
No, and it felt pretty terrible going to Oakland 2 weeks ago, didn't it, after that Steelers game? And you're right about the injuries. I mean, the injuries are kind of out of control in the NFL right now. It's not just the Ravens. Giants lost 4 wide receivers in one game. Of course, the Rodgers injury changes the whole sport, really, because the Packers go from one of the teams with a chance to go to the Super Bowl to not, because Rodgers is so. That's an example of why I'm writing this book about how important the quarterback position is in the NFL. The days when you can win a Super Bowl with a game manager are gone. You might be able to get to the playoffs, but you're not winning the Super Bowl with a guy who's just a game manager, unless you have the Ravens defense of 2000 or the Broncos defense of a couple of years ago, and most teams don't have that. But, Joe takes it like a man. You know that from personal experience. He's not going to stand there. I mean, how many drops were there in that game on Sunday?
More than he wanted to point out, right? Or us, for that matter.
He would never bring it up. And when people bring it up to him, he goes, you know what? You just got to keep trying to make plays. And that sounds like a cliche, cliche answer. But what's he supposed to do? Is he supposed to say, I can't believe Campanaro dropped that ball over the middle? Is he supposed to say, I can't believe I threw two interceptions, and both of them went right off the hands of my receivers? He's not going to say that. That's not who he is.
I asked him why, how he would be optimistic. Remember the planking episode when he, Denver Super Bowl year, threw the pick six, cost them the game, all things were awful, and then 6 weeks later they won the Super Bowl. And I asked him about that, and he said something to me that was just so basic and so sort of Tony Robbins kind of in my own philosophy. I said, how do you stay positive, through something like that? He said, why would you think about anything else? Why would you focus on anything other than being successful? And I guess that's his mindset of, that play happened. Why? If I'm focusing on that, I'm not making the next play. It's always on to the next play. And I don't know, you can be successful at that position.
Well, you have to be the same way after you throw a 70-yard touchdown pass, too. And after you win a game, it's on to the next play, on to the next game. And that's what successful teams, athletes, coaches do. And the thing is, you got to remember one thing, Nestor. When a quarterback like Joe Flacco or any good quarterback throws a pick six, he doesn't walk to the sideline and think, I'm not a good quarterback anymore. He walks to the sideline and says, give me the ball back. I'll get something done next time. That's what you have to do to be successful really in anything, much less playing football.
It's funny you'd say game manager, and you said to me, Alex Smith is going to be in my book. Boy, that's got to piss him off at this point, right? And until he wags his finger, holds the trophy, has a parade, that will be, number one overall game manager.
Yeah.
Can't win in January with him, right?
Yeah, and I know he very much wants to be not the guy who gets to the playoffs every year. He's had his teams in the playoffs 6 of the last 7 years, but be the guy who wins the Super Bowl. And the Washington Post described him as a journeyman a couple weeks ago. And I personally found that amusing. I mean, he's better than a journeyman. He may not be Brady, he may not be Manning, he may not, be a superstar, but he's a very good quarterback and has had a lot of success. But you're right, that's the way sports is until he gets it done in January. Same with Andy Reid. Andy Reid's coached in one Super Bowl, lost it, but he's going to be just viewed as a very good coach until and unless he actually wins a Super Bowl. Right? I mean, the irony is that right now, especially with Rodgers down, if you were voting for MVP, even coming off the loss to the Steelers, right now, it'd probably be Alex Smith.
You say journeyman, and then there's Ryan Fitzpatrick, right? I mean, there's another
he
guy.
He is a journeyman. Well, I would tell you that.
And a delightfully, really, really intelligent dude. I got to know him at that block a couple years ago.
It's not just that he went to Harvard. Although here's a twist. If Alex Smith hadn't ended up going to Utah, they came in and recruited him late, he might have gone to Harvard. He was recruited very highly by Ivy League schools because he was a great student. He went to college as a junior because he passed 9 AP classes. And he said that he seriously thought of Harvard, and if he'd gone to Harvard, he and Fitzpatrick would have been teammates. That's two pretty good quarterbacks to be playing at an Ivy League school at the same time. But Fitzpatrick, like Alex Smith, plays in that Lake Tahoe thing for celebrities every summer. And a couple of years ago, they were paired together. And at those events, you've probably been to them. They do these elaborate introductions of each guy. And so the starter gets up and he says, and please welcome from the Kansas City Chiefs, the #1 draft pick in the 2005 NFL Draft, Alex Smith. And then Fitzpatrick is next, and he had worked this out with the starter. And so the starter says, please welcome from I guess he was with the Jets at the time, from the New York Jets, the 250th pick in the 2005 NFL Draft. And because that's what Fitzpatrick was picked. He was a little disappointed he didn't get to be Mr. Irrelevant. He missed it by 6.
Well, I mean, that's always a nice parade they give you at California for that.
Yeah.
John Feinstein joining us here. All right, let's get out of the toy department and get into the real world here. Dude, I'm a journalist. You're a journalist. Journalism under attack by the leader of the free world, the NFL, caught up in this, meetings in New York. Goodell is probably on the left side of the fence. Jerry Jones, Rob Kraft are on the Trump side of the fence. I don't know where this is going, but do you not get the vibe being in the stadium the last couple of weeks? You've been around this a long time. This is getting thick now in a way that I don't think, the NFL could have said, well, CTE trouble this year, okay. Maybe terrorism at one of our games, okay, we have to prepare for that. But this is something there's no playbook on, and the relationship that Trump sat Shiva at Kraft's wife's after her death.
Right.
Jerry Jones is the biggest donor. We all know he really kind of runs the league, even though it's got Rodgers' head on it at this point. This is messy beyond belief, especially for the players and the trust or the Players Association. There's not going to be any easy trapdoor in this thing, but I don't know how this could be successfully navigated against them. This was almost presidential terrorism on the NFL, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing changed when Trump came out with that tweet about, firing those SOBs, and the battle lines were drawn at that point. I think that until that happened, things had kind of calmed down. There were guys kneeling for the anthem here and there. That's going to go on for a while. It's now going on in Germany in their biggest soccer league. I'm sure you saw that story over the weekend.
Absolutely.
But I think it would have stayed pretty calm. The Kaepernick thing has pretty much blown over. We all know he was blackballed. We all know if he stood for the anthem last year, he'd be on a team somewhere. He's certainly one of the best 64 quarterbacks available in the NFL. But again, that was blowing over. Kaepernick has not made a big stink about it until now, when he just filed the lawsuit. And I don't think he has a chance in the lawsuit because proving collusion is almost impossible unless you have a smoking gun of some kind. But then Trump basically, as you said, declares war on the NFL players, and the NFL players responded by saying, "Okay, fine. You want to fight? We'll give you a fight." And then Trump, of course, is counting on the fact that there will be some fans, not all fans, some fans who will say, "How dare they not stand for the anthem?" Because I think sometimes there's a misunderstanding of what guys are doing when they're kneeling. I mean, it should be remembered that when Kaepernick first started doing this, he was sitting. And he actually spoke to, I always forget the guy's name, but he's a former NFL player who was a Marine. And he went and met with him and asked him to come and kneel with him. Because the Marine was the one who said to him, if you kneel, it's different than if you sit. If you sit, you're simply being disrespectful. If you kneel, you're saying, I'm trying to make a point. I'm not disrespecting the flag or the anthem. I'm trying to make a peaceful protest about something that I think is wrong and that we need to have more dialogue on. And he said, I can't kneel with you. I was in the service. I can't do that. But he did come and stand there with his hand on his shoulder. And I have a lot of military friends, as you know, because I wrote the Army-Navy book 21 years ago and did the Navy games on radio for 14 years. I still have a lot of friends who've served overseas. And almost to a man, they will tell you the same thing. That's why we fought. We fought so that Colin Kaepernick would have the right, which in many countries he wouldn't, to do this. We don't agree with it. We would never do it ourselves, but we respect and fought for his right to do it.
The perniciousness of this in regard to the president and not being allowed into the league, onto the team, he tried all he could do to get into the league. He fought with the league, the USFL thing. At its heart, that's the problem I'm having with it. And I would think that should be a problem that Steve Bisciotti and Shad Khan, who wrote a check to him, and Dan Snyder and all the rest of them to say, how could you take a hit out on our league? And then send the vice president in for the skit that they pulled out in Indiana.
That was a stunt. That was a stunt.
Well, everything's a stunt.
It would have been nice to send that $250,000 to Puerto Rico, wouldn't it?
I got a lot of issues here, and I don't take them up on the radio often, but I do take it up with guys like you who, examine these things. And one of the real problems here is the stick to sports, the shut up, all of that stuff. And then there's the situation at ESPN where you're telling journalists to have an opinion. John, you were a columnist for, most of your adult life as I know you, to have an opinion, and column means tell me what you think, not what the flag, not what the Washington Post Register says or what the editor-in-chief thinks or what the politics of the sponsors are. Tell me what you think. We're really, really in some sticky area here. I mean, I went to school for this, and guys like you taught me this is starting to burn at me a little bit. I own an FCC license as well, so that goes on top of this. If I say what I think, they're going to come take my license away. Really?
Well, I think Trump would like you to believe that. That's why he's been going after NBC, and that's why he's been attacking the media and ESPN and Jamel Hill. You used the word presidential terrorism. There is something of that in terms of his behavior with the media. And your point about the NFL is a very good one. Because remember what he tweeted, I think it was a week or 2 weeks ago, I lose track of his tweets, when he said, how can we continue to allow the NFL owners to get these massive tax breaks when they can't even get their players to stand for the national anthem? The NFL doesn't get a massive tax break. They gave up their tax breaks 2 years ago because it's complicated, but because financially it didn't really affect them. But they don't get a tax break. And the President of the United States is tweeting something that simply isn't true when he tweets that. Just as, yesterday when he insisted that Presidents Obama and Bush did not call the victims of military killed overseas. And that, both of them have come out and said, well, that's completely 100% untrue. So he has this schoolyard mentality that you can say anything you want and nobody's going to challenge you on it. Well, except when you're president, people are going to challenge you on it if you're flat out wrong.
I have no idea what direction the NFL is going to take here. I mean, this is an ugly spot, and I certainly have, felt the sunburn of all of it with sponsors saying we don't want Ravens shows in our bar anymore. I'm not going to be a Ravens fan anymore. And I think we've seen it with our own eyes that there are people staying away. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, there were empty seats, quite a few empty seats at M&T Bank Stadium on Sunday, and some of it had to do with the opponent, but I don't think all of it had to do with the opponent, but I still think it's a minority, Nestor. I still don't see football fans long-term turning their back on the NFL. They might get upset, might threaten a boycott, might stay away for a couple of weeks, but it's like me as a lifelong Mets fan. At times I've gotten so disgusted. I'm not going to be a Mets fan anymore. I'm going to root for the Orioles, or I'll root for the Red Sox, or anybody but the Yankees. But I eventually, my heart is still with the Mets. I think most people's heart is still with the NFL.
John Feinstein joining us here. He is Jay Feinstein. Books out on Twitter. The new book is The First Major, the inside story of the 2016 Ryder Cup. Give it a plug, John. Tell me about the book a little bit here.
Well, I always wanted to do a Ryder Cup book, Nestor, dating back to when I did A Good Walk Spoiled in the mid-'90s. And finally, last year was the year to do it. I had two captains in Davis Love and Darren Clark, who I knew well, who I knew would cooperate with me. It was an absolute must-win year for the U.S. They were playing at home. They'd lost that big lead in 2012. They lost badly at Glen Eagles, the fight between Watson and Mickelson. There was just too much good storytelling to be done. And so I talked to just about every player on both teams, obviously the captains. Got a lot of very, for lack of a better term, inside stuff. I hate the term insider. It's so overused. But there's stuff that you'll learn if you read the book from inside the team rooms. You'll learn more about guys like McIlroy and Spieth and Mickelson and everybody who played, really. And it was a lot of fun for me because I was able to get inside and be able to tell the stories in the book from the inside.
Always love your work. Always love having you on the program, and delighted that you're running around chasing Joe Flacco. I can't wait to read it. The book comes out next Christmas. It'll be called Quarterback. John's in the midst of working that and working Minneapolis. Hey, I'll see you in the Twin Cities on Sunday, and I'm using this as a little bit of an appetizer. I'm going to pick up like a scarf and some earmuffs and all that stuff that I'm going to need in about 14 weeks when we get out there and start freezing in February for 9 days, right?
Well, have fun. I'll see you out there on Sunday.
You got it. John Feinstein joining us here live via satellite, talking all things books and sports and politics and journalism and all that good stuff. You can find him at Jay Feinstein Books on Twitter, as well as at jfeinsteinbooks.com. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear. Big week for me. I'm entering the Dundalk High School Hall of Fame on Friday afternoon at 4:30. Everyone's welcome to stop by, watch the football game. It's homecoming. Kelly Green and Gold. And after that, join us at Costas for crabs, crab cakes, beer, pit beef, whatever your heart desires. We'll be meeting folks out at Costas after the game. My family will be there. Stop by. If you want to salute my mom with a beverage of choice as well, it'll be fun. They got a band as well. So I'm in the mood for crabs. I got to have crabs one more time. I know the weather broke a little bit this week, but I'm on it. You can find me 24 hours a day out in that social media thing. Some places it's a cesspool. I just think of mine as sort of a luxurious pool, like an infinity pool. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. I'm Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.